Welcome to Two Minds, One Mystery, where we explore true crime around Asia. I'm your host, Surin.
And I'm Yvonne.
Today's content involves sensitive subject matters that may be distressing to some listeners. This includes topics such as child endangerment and some graphic descriptions. We understand that these topics can be triggering for some individuals, and we want to ensure that our listeners are aware of the nature of today's discussion. If you believe that these subjects may be difficult for you to listen to, we encourage you to skip this episode and join us for another topic that suits your preferences. Now, let's start with today's episode.
In the early hours of January 6, 1979, at 6:30 a.m., a week before CNY, Tan Quen Chai and Lee Mei Ying began their day, preparing to leave their one-room flat at Block 58, Geylang Bahru, while the children were still asleep. Their small but close-knit family consisted of 6 members, the parents and their 4 young children. The husband and wife were hardworking parents who ran a minibus business, a way for many students to commute to schools in the vicinity. Their mornings were a hurricane of activities, filled with the hustle and bustle of getting the kids ready for the day ahead. At around 7:10 a.m., amidst the chaos of their morning routine, Mrs. Lee had a crucial ritual. She would make a routine call back home to make sure her children were awake and prepared for school. There are 3 boys, Tan Kok Peng, age 10, Tan Kok Hin, age 8, and Tan Kok Soon, age 6, were students at Bendemeer Road Primary School. Meanwhile, their youngest member, 5 years old, Tan Chin Lee, attended the People's Association kindergarten. But on this particular morning, as Mrs. Lee made her routine call at approximately 7:10 a.m., she was met with no response. Puzzled and growing increasingly concerned, she tried repeatedly dialing their home number in 3 separate calls, only to be met with a disheartening absence of response from her children. As desperation crept in, Mrs. Lee decided to reach out to her neighbor to seek assistance. She asked the neighbor to knock on their door, hoping that perhaps the children were merely still asleep. However, despite the neighbor's well-intentioned attempts, the flat remained quiet. In the end, Mrs. Lee and the neighbor just thought that the children had woken up early that morning and had left the premises. They got back to their house slightly after 10 a.m. Unbeknownst to what they were about to witness, they found their children's bodies in the bathroom. The children's bodies were stacked one on top of the other, with their only daughter being right on the top. It was believed that the bodies were stacked in the order in which they were killed first.
Oh my goodness. That's actually absolutely horrifying. I can't even imagine the shock, the devastation that the family would actually feel upon returning home to such a gruesome scene. How brutally were the children killed? How were they killed? What are the causes of death?
According to the pathologist's finding, every child had at least 20 cuts or lacerations on their head and limb. The youngest, Chin had multiple lacerations on her face, while Kok Peng is not gonna be nice, but his right arm was like almost severed off from his body.
Oh god, that's so disturbing. I mean, every child having at least 20 cuts or lacerations on their heads and limbs? And Kok Peng's arm literally almost severed?
Yeah.
It's so hard to wrap your head around the brutality of it, dude. I'm curious, like, surely the CID was involved in this such a major case. Did the investigation actually offer any insights?
An investigation conducted, by the CID, they actually revealed several crucial insights into the tragic event. Notably, there were no signs of forced entry, strongly implying that the children may have willingly opened the door to someone they knew. Plus, none of the rooms were ransacked, nor was anything taken, which rules out any suspicion of robbery. Additionally, the discovery of strands of hair in Kok Peng's clenched hand indicated that he attempted to defend himself against the attacker, likely explaining, the slashes on his right arm. Further examination of the crime scene also revealed that the perpetrator appeared to have used a chopper, which is basically a cleaver, that was actually taken from the kitchen, and a dagger, which resulted in a combination of slashes and stab wounds on the victims. Another significant finding was the absence of screams or loud noises, which is very odd. But this also suggests that more than one assailant might have been involved. Investigators theorized that one individual may have been responsible for subduing the children, while the other just took them to the bathroom where, the gruesome crime unfold. What's even more shocking is the presence of blood traces in the kitchen sink and the lack of bloodstains in the living room. This strongly indicates that, the perpetrators did a thorough cleanup, and this was literally orchestrated, highlighting the premeditated nature of the massacre. Don't you think it's a bit weird that the murderers chose the most convenient time to strike? Which was between 6:30 a.m. and 7:10 a.m. This really suggests that it was really meticulously planned, and it shows that this person intimately knew the family's daily routine.
Yeah, like the murderer actually chose, like you said, such a specific window of time to strike, just within that short 35 minutes, right
Yeah.
in the early hours when they know the parents are out busy with their typical class, like morning routine, I assume. And it all points to a level of familiarity and planning, and that's very, very unsettling. This case raises so many questions about who could have done this, and most importantly, why?
It's really chilling to hear cases like this, because it shows that it's very obvious that the family knows this person really well, because what kind of person just sits there and watches your daily routine? I doubt it would be a stalker, because of how brutal the killings were.
Right, right. And to think about someone you know actually just brutally murdering your children, your young children.
Yeah, it's so hard to believe. That shows the mentality last time. People used to trust each other really easily. From the years when my mom was really young. I used to question her why would you let a stranger into your house, so on and so forth. And she was like, people were just really trusting last time. Nobody thought there were people like this out there. So it's really sad to hear that, you know, all these gruesome acts had to happen to this one specific family.
Oh god.
But I also want to point out why I don't get why there's no sound. Why was it silent? You know?
I mean, investigators did mention that there's a possibility of more than one assailant being involved. So I guess it's either number one, the other assailant is doing such a good job subduing the children, making sure they're actually hush hush and quiet. Or number two, somehow something happened in the house and all the other kids were actually unconscious before they were killed.
That's also a possibility. Because for
Right.
young children, you would assume that they will scream after they, see what happens to their first sibling. But maybe
Definitely.
I didn't see.
Yeah, definitely. And they stay at a HDB flat in Geylang Bahru. I've seen
Mm-hmm.
photos of this particular flat itself before it was torn down. The corridors are actually really narrow. It's literally it's just one stretch of, if you stretch your feet across the balcony, across the corridor, you may actually reach, if you are you have longer legs, you may actually reach the other side of the other side of your neighbor's door already.
Yeah, you can actually. You can. It's
Yeah.
not. It's very close knit. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So to think that none of the neighbors actually heard anything, there were no noises whatsoever.
Plus, there's
It's
upstairs and downstairs too.
exactly it's so
Not to mention, the neighbors outside. I get if the neighbors outside couldn't hear, but the upstairs neighbor and downstairs neighbor, the odds of nobody hearing anything.
exactly. And for those of our listeners who actually stay in HDB flats or apartments or condominiums, you would know that being in a washroom sometimes, in most cases, you could actually hear the water from the pipe trickling down, sounds of cleaning, sounds of, literally people doing something in the washroom above or below you.
But I guess probably also, the timing of the killings also had to play a huge role. Because I'm
True, that's
sure
true.
if the parents were already out of the house by then, what say, the upstairs neighbor?
God, but it's so chilling to think about it. Like,
Yeah.
if you already know a family and you just you plan all these out and you just brutally murder. I get that you may have a grudge on the parents, but you just brutally murder children, like literally
Yeah.
primary school kids and a kindergarten kid
Yeah.
over
But
a grudge against the parents, maybe?
maybe. Seems like it. Seems like there's a lot of anger involved as well.
Oh
But
god.
even even though you intimately know the parents, like to be able to plan something like that, the fact that it didn't cross that person's mind that, oh, maybe I shouldn't do this, it's just like, yeah.
I feel like maybe at that point, either the murderer really had a very strong motive, or God knows why, man. Like really, God knows.
Yep.
I'm just wondering if the investigators actually suspect, like, surely like people like us who hear about these things, we're already like thinking, and some, like, we can't help but to speculate already. Surely
Yeah.
the investigators will be speculating similar things, right? Or at least to suspect that someone close to the family would have done this.
Yep. I'm gonna get into that part right after this. After the initial assessment, investigators believe that the gruesome murder of the Tan siblings had been carefully planned and carried out by someone closely connected to the Tan family. This led to months of thorough investigations involving hundreds of interviews with potential suspects. During this process, various witnesses emerged, but not all of their accounts proved reliable. One witness claimed to have seen a blood-soaked couple near the crime scene, but it later turned out to be a fabricated story. Another eyewitness reclaimed an altercation involving a man named Lee, though Lee denied any such incident, and also an older lady known as Granny, which I assume is Ama because this is translated, who typically observed the children playing in the corridor each morning. But somehow she was unable to provide any information of the day of the tragedy because she was occupied, she was washing her hair. So she didn't see or hear anything that day. Kinda sus, Granny, but okay. But there's an interesting twist to this case. A taxi driver actually came forward with crucial information stating that he had picked up a man in his 20s near the crime scene at around 8 a.m. The man had blood stains on his left side and concealed a knife, which actually accidentally fell out when he exited the taxi. So this man was later identified as Uncle. So who he was he's a Malaysian oof, and he was also a neighbor of the Tan family who frequently visited them to borrow their phone for calls to Malaysia. However, Uncle was eventually released by the police after 2 weeks due to lack of concrete evidence. After all that, he moved from Block 58 along with his sister.
I shouldn't be speculating, but shouldn't that be kind of suspicious already?
And even like everything that happened on that day was so suspicious. Like the grandma, supposedly that one day she went to wash her hair. The uncle with the knife and the blood stain. Oh, happened to just move away after, being interrogated for 2 weeks. It doesn't exactly
Exactly.
look good for him.
It's so abrupt, like suddenly. And how did he even explain how he got like blood stains on his knife?
Right? How did he pick his way out of that?
Exactly, like how are you gonna explain it? Like, oh, I used it for kitchen stuff. I
Yeah.
don't
And
know,
also,
like,
why would you have a knife in a taxi?
right. And the taxi driver just didn't report to the police immediately. He just thinks like, oh, how else? I'll wait a while.
Right? Why would you wait?
I'm so
So weird.
confused, dude. It's either people then, like you said, were so trusting, or that like people really just thought like, I'm just gonna mind my own business.
Yeah. Either that or he thought he was like, a butcher. But also
Right.
doesn't make sense.
And okay, let's go back to the fact that this particular uncle, this particular guy, is from Malaysia.
You know? It really doesn't make Malaysians look
He
good at all.
he can literally take a bus down back to Malaysia to escape if anything happens.
Yeah, he's less than an hour, actually less than 30 minutes away from
Yeah.
Malaysia.
And the fact he
Oh,
moved out.
with his sister. Oh, from the block that he lived in. What? And he used to use the phone.
Right. Wait, block 58 was the same block that the family stayed in. Right.
Yeah, he's their neighbor, yeah.
Oh my god.
I mean, like, everybody in the block technically is your neighbor because of how close you guys live. But,
I
like,
mean,
but still, it's very, very suspicious.
yeah,
Ah,
surely. But I mean, like, you know how even outsiders like us could speculate about this particular uncle, right? I'm just
Yeah.
imagining, like, what about the victim's parents? Would they be speculating who would they suspect most? If I get to interrogate them, no, maybe not interrogate, that's pretty bad of a word. If I get to question them if they suspect of anyone, I would probably ask them, like, who do you suspect would, commit these heinous acts towards your children most? Like,
Right.
who would be the most suspicious one?
The most shocking speculation was actually from the victim's own father. So, a few months prior to the murder, their family was almost robbed, and one of the kids witnessed it. And when asked by the news reporter, like one neighbor, Mrs. Tan mentioned that 5 days prior, they saw a suspicious man had mistakenly knocked on their door. Right? Like, what? How do you leave this part out? I don't understand. And also another neighbor by the surname of Wu, oh my god, mentioned that the victim's mom actually lost her key like 1 month before the murder and they didn't change the locks. Suspicious much? It's definitely someone that they're close to, but the motive is still like not clear at all.
Yeah, indeed. It's so tragic and baffling. And the proximity of Chinese New Year and the complex web of potential suspects. It's so confusing for investigators. It must be all lumped together. There are so many possibilities, but no fixed clues, nothing that could actually draw particularly to the case. I can only imagine like the anguish and frustration of the family, particularly investigators who lack like technology then, like how all of them must have felt in search for the answers. And to think the family would be grieving during the upcoming festivity, knowing that their children, who would always be a huge part of their family, were just murdered a week before.
It's really heartbreaking. Not to mention, like, this person literally ruined their Chinese New Year.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
and that's supposed to be such a prosperous holiday, and this person chose right then and there to murder like all their kids.
Yeah, and I actually saw a video about this particular family. Apparently, according to the neighbors, then that after the case, the neighbors actually spotted like the couple, the parents, the father particularly, eating quietly with literally like with dining sets of their children placed around him at the dining table. He was eating as if they were still around him.
That's so sad.
Yeah.
That's so heartbreaking. Oh my, I didn't know about that.
Yeah, and this particular neighbor, when she was recounting to reporters, she was actually crying about it because she recounted then that she had to warn her children not to play near the houses, and she couldn't explain to her children why their friends were gone already.
My god, I forgot about. I didn't think about that. Can you imagine their friends? How do you explain to a kid that, oh, your friends got murdered?
Yes. And to think that most people who lives in like HDBs, they most likely wouldn't move away so soon, so abruptly like that. They would most likely live through it for generations. So they just grow up, and then eventually when they start being like of age, they start to realize like, oh, that's what happened.
But I'm quite surprised that a Malaysian is staying in a HDB flat because
it's actually very possible because back then my uncle used to work in Singapore. He's also Malaysian. He used to work in Singapore. He used to stay in the HDB flat as well. He rented like the space from a Singaporean.
Oh, okay. So if it's rented, yeah, okay. Because technically the flat itself, right, only a Malaysian or a PR can actually buy a HDB flat. But they can also rent it out to people. I forgot about that, yeah.
So what happened next after the murder? Like, I know we've actually talked about how all the speculations and whatnot. I'm hoping that, at least something was there. Maybe investigators found something to the murder, or like what happened next after the murder. What happened to the family?
So this part is really going to just piss you off, and also I feel like it gave away the murderer's like relationship to the parents, because 2 weeks after the tragic murder, Mr. Tan and Mrs. Lee actually received a Chinese New Year card featuring children playing together. The card was addressed to the couple using their nicknames Ah Chai and Ah Eng, and it contained a rather unsettling message in Chinese. So I can't read Chinese, so if you would read it for our Chinese listeners.
Okay, so the message actually reads as follows. It says 阿柴阿英，现在你们终于断子绝孙啦，哈哈哈，凶仔。
Okay, and the translated version is Ah Chai Ah Eng. Now you finally have no bloodline. Ha ha ha. And the card was actually also signed off as the murderer to rub further salt on the wound, on the already aching wounds of the parents. So this message actually alluded to a well-kept secret within the Tan family, which was that Mrs. Lee actually had a sterilization procedure done to her. She actually got it done after she gave birth to their youngest, Chin Yi, like 5 years prior. However, due to the limited forensic technology available in Singapore, like during the 1970s, it was actually impossible to test the fingerprints on the card and trace it back to the person responsible for the disturbing message. And the senior CID officer investigating the case actually spoke on the case, stating, "It's sickening to see the dead little children. It's so gruesome. It's terrible." So this was said by the senior CID officer. And even from all that, over the years, different theories actually had sprung up with regards to the cause of the murder, all of which the family denied. So the first theory is the love affair theory. So it suggested that Mrs. Lee had engaged in an affair with a close friend, possibly uncle, and that the lover became enraged when Mrs. Lee hesitated to leave her family for him. This could have motivated him to, commit a heinous act. Because there's always like a standard few motivations, like what, love, money, and I forgot the other one.
But I feel like wouldn't it be a little bit too far-fetched
Feel
to
like it is.
actually right to actually think that it's so dramatic, like, oh, there's a love triangle going on and the wife doesn't want to leave her husband for me, so I'm gonna kill her kids right now. It feels a little bit too, I don't know, man. I don't want to be disrespectful, but it sounds a little bit far-fetched to think that's motivated by a love affair.
Yeah, same. Because there weren't any like proof. There's no proof. Like you don't even know.
Exactly.
Literally nothing that the neighbors have said even speculated, even something close to what this
It's
theory is.
It feels like something like those aunties in wet markets would gossip about instead, particularly on this theory, rather
Yeah.
than something that may actually make more sense.
Yeah,
And
which is
I
very
mean,
damaging to the case. Like very, very damaging to the case.
definitely. And okay, even if there's a likelihood of a love affair, if you were to think from a perspective of this particular uncle, you love this woman, and the woman doesn't want to leave her family for you, would you be more angry at her or at least her husband?
Yeah,
Why
you
why
would.
the kids?
Yeah, why the kids? It doesn't explain why he killed the kids. Because, like you said, he would be more angry at the husband because she doesn't want to leave him. So why kill the kids and not the husband?
Exactly. If anything, if there are any theories about like greed, if you're telling me like, oh, maybe they were killed because of, money matters, or like there's some involvement of money, right? I may actually believe it even more.
Yeah, there's actually like a few that involve money. So the next theory is basically involving like also money, yeah. So the next theory is the Tontin scheme. The Tan family's involvement in an illegal Tontin scheme was actually another angle explored. In this scheme, individuals contributed to a common fund with the last surviving members inheriting the entire sum. So it was speculated that the two women associated with this scheme may have resorted to murder in order to claim the money. Which makes sense, killing the children, but wouldn't you want to kill the entire family and not just the kids?
Oh,
A
I
bit.
don't know how. Usually when people speculate and theorize, surely there must be reasons for them to think that way. Like previously, they think the suspect, the uncle, has an affair with the wife, Like they
Yeah.
suspect it probably because the uncle is always visiting the house.
Yeah.
But about the Tontine scheme, I'm actually curious to. I don't know if there has been any reportings on this. I'm actually curious to actually know if there has been any updates on whether this has been true.
Now, all the theories that I'm mentioning here are all denied, but I'm just mentioning like what people came up with.
Mm.
Yeah, I feel like this one is even more far-fetched than the love affair, because at least the love affair had the fact that the uncle was going over to the house regularly, but this one has like, no concrete basis surrounding it.
Mm.
Pretty random.
But well, it does show that there is a likelihood of greed being a motivating factor for this particular murder.
Yeah, true.
Maybe.
Even the next theory also suggests like greed, because in like, especially this part of the world, like Asia, from what I know, in Malaysia and Singapore, they are really into 4D, aka Toto. Which, if
Oh
you don't know,
god.
is basically like lottery tickets, where you put in a number that you want to buy, and if your number comes out, you basically get like money back, or you get the grand prize or jackpot or something. So they do a lot of it in Singapore and in Malaysia also. So the next theory actually suggests that a relative of of Mrs. Lee had reportedly asked her to purchase this lottery ticket, the Toto number, which ended up winning a substantial prize of $45,000, which is equivalent to $97,000 today. But Mrs. Lee, however, claimed to have forgotten to buy the tickets, so which further fuels that this theory proposed that the relative was aware of Mrs. Lee's so-called deception and sought to take revenge by killing the children before fleeing the country.
Mm.
I mean, it makes sense, but there's no proof.
Yeah, definitely there's no proof. Else the investigation unit would have already commented on it already.
Yeah,
But
but it's not unthinkable like the other one. It's still very possible, but still, you need proof to prove it.
definitely there should be
Yeah.
evidences for all these things. And I feel like all these things sometimes complicate the investigation process as a whole.
Even okay, so then the last theory, I feel like is the most probable one, but then again, it was all denied. So take it with a grain of salt. So the last one is like how we suspected, which is the uncle's involvement, the Malaysian uncle. So another theory, it implies that the uncle is involved in the murders. Some believe that it was he who had asked, Mrs. Lee to buy the lottery tickets. And the people in the community, including the couple, supposedly knew of Uncle's guilt but remained silent due to his association with street gangs. And additionally, there were rumors that the couple were involved in drug activities, and they actually feared that Uncle will expose them, potentially leading to the death penalty.
Right, right. Because since back then, Singapore has already established like a direct death penalty for anyone who sells drugs or has drugs, if I remember correctly.
Yes. And also, if you didn't know, back in the day, Singapore was basically covered in gangs. There were gangs everywhere. It was full of gangsters, and it was actually really scary. It wasn't as safe as it is today. Them claiming that maybe gangsters were involved isn't that, unbelievable, but it's really scary. But then again, like, if there was a theory that speculated that there were drugs involved, of course you would deny it, right, like you wouldn't say like, yeah, okay, that one is true.
I feel like it would, even if there has been involvement of drugs. I feel like in comparison to your family being murdered, I feel like the parents would have at the very least said something about it. Judging by how the mother of this case is still out there seeking for old neighbors to come
Come forward,
any
yeah.
clues, any evidences at all.
Mm.
Like she's still alive up to this day, asking people for help to come forward. So I feel
Yeah.
like if there has been drug involvement, I feel like the wife, the mother, would have already commented something, surely, right?
Yeah. And also maybe the people coming up with these theories, like I would believe that, if you don't know the case and if you were the person actually involved in the case, like you would be really offended by all of these theories, these like baseless theories, if I was the mom lah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
It,
So you can
like,
tell like from their reaction to like all the theories whether it's like probable or not.
and even to see like news articles about this case, you could actually see a lot of images of the husband and wife literally crying and just like
Yeah.
somewhat huddled together crying at the sight of
Yeah.
the case.
So I actually have information like what happened after the investigation and everything. Let's get into that. So the four siblings were buried at Choa Cemetery. They were dressed in their best clothes and they were buried along with their school bags and beloved toys. And sadly, Mrs. Lee actually fainted many times as her children were being put into their burial spots. It really breaks my heart talking about
Yeah,
this.
it's so heart-wrenching. The image of her just fainting multiple times as a beloved, like literally her treasure, her blood and soul, were laid to rest is so incredibly painful to imagine. It's such
Yeah.
a stark reminder of the profound loss and unimaginable grief that a family would have endured if they've lost a family member due to murder.
Yeah. It's really sad. Like, I know if like some of our listeners are like parents. You really just can't imagine the pain you would feel as a parent to lose your children. That's literally your blood, sweat and tears right there. Just taken away from you. They were part of you for like 9 months and they're just killed so gruesomely. I feel like the way that they were killed also played a part because honest to God, if I was the mom, I would faint a lot of times too. Definitely.
Really.
Yeah, I actually have like information on what happened even after the burial also. So after the murder and everything, the couple actually gave up their minibus business and they started working in a plastic bag manufacturing firm and seeking solace and a way to heal. The Tans actually registered with the social welfare department expressing their desire to adopt two children. However, in December of 1983, Mrs. Lee, at the age of 35, she reversed her sterilization procedure and gave birth to a baby boy.
Aww.
Yeah. But I feel like it's even worse for the baby boy because like how do you tell that baby like, oh, you actually have four other siblings before you? I feel like that would really mess me up. Because definitely, like, there's no doubt that the kid is gonna know about it.
Yeah, definitely. Actually, you are right about this. Her youngest son now, actually is the family that is helping her look for hints, any evidences regarding the previous case of the murder of his siblings.
Know that actually. I didn't know that. It's so
Yeah.
adorable.
Yeah, he's actually helping his mom, who is around 70 years old-ish now.
Yeah, she's
Yeah,
about
70
70.
plus. 75, I think 75. He's actually helping his mom look for evidence. And I think he was the one who contacted like some community group or something in Singapore. I'm not sure if you've read about that.
Yeah, the local community group. If I'm not wrong, they're called the Crime Library Singapore or something. CLS.
Yeah, that's the one. I think he went forward. He was either approached by them or he approached them directly. I'm not too sure about that, but apparently there has been some updates to the case.
Yeah, the case has been reopened after 44 years. So it was reopened in April of 2021 actually. Yeah, so it's been like 2 years since they opened the case. But as of like, updates from 2 years later, there's not really that many updates. We only know that the mom's real name is Lee MC and she wasn't actually locally born. Like she's not Singaporean.
Mm,
And they also learned that some of the neighbors of the Tan family they held a lot of crucial information that wasn't revealed to the police.
hmm.
But while they are going through all this information, it is still yet to be verified. Let's hope that they actually figure out who did this after 44 years.
I truly hope so. This case is such a chilling reminder that sometimes the most heinous crimes can actually happen within the confines of one's own homes. In this instance, it left a family shattered and a community in shock.
Indeed. We hope that one day the answers to this tragic mystery will come to light and bring some closure to the Tan family, because they really truly do deserve that closure. They need their hearts to be mended. Seriously. Like 4 children gone, that's crazy.
Yeah.
But until then, we remember the Tan family siblings and the enduring questions that surround their untimely and deeply tragic death. Thank you, listeners, for listening. We post every week, so stay tuned for the next. I hope you enjoy our podcast so far. Please do follow our Instagram at 2minds1mystery, where we'll be posting the evidence pictures of all the cases we discuss and updates. And with that, stay curious, stay cautious, and may the clues always lead you to the truth. Until next time, keep your wits sharp and your suspicions sharper. This has been 2 Minds, 1 Mystery, where mysteries unravel and secrets are revealed.